Mo Edjlali is one of those really incredible people that I look up to, I admire. He has done a lot for the mindfulness community. He's absolutely a pivotal and influential leader in the mindfulness community. I know you're going to love meeting him. The thing that impresses me the most about him is how humble, thoughtful, and insightful he is. He's the founder of an organization called Mindful Leader, which has nothing to do with this podcast. But I am so excited for you to meet him and learn about him, about the Mindful Leader organization. And we're going to talk about mindfulness and a lot of great topics. Get ready for Mo Edjlali, the Mindful Leader. Mo Edjlali is the founder and CEO of Mindful Leader, whose mission is to enable people to foster mindfulness and compassion in the workplace. He has served as a board member or advisor to multiple nonprofits, including Insight Meditation Community of Washington, D.C., Insight on the Inside, Minds Incorporated, Think Impact, Art for Humanity, and Hungry for Music, which I'm going to ask you more about Hungry for Music in a little bit. Mo is a serial entrepreneur and has over 25 years of experience in technology and executive management for startups, nonprofits, Fortune 500 companies, and government agencies. He graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Engineering from Virginia Tech, which is a fine institution. Mo, I am so happy to have you with us today. I appreciate you being here.
It's my pleasure, David. Thank you for having me.
I am super excited to have you. Mindful Leader is an incredible organization, and there's no connection to the Mindful Leader podcast. But and I want to talk about that a second. When I started the Mindful Leader podcast, I named it the Mindful Leader podcast, and at the time, I didn't know anything about Mindful Leader organization. But it was shortly after that that I learned about Mindful Leader, and what an incredible organization. And I have since gotten a couple certifications with Mindful Leader. I got my MBSR certification. I got my certified workplace mindful facilitator certification with Mindful Leader. I've been to the mindful, I can't remember the name of it, but the mindfulness conference last year. I'm already signed up to go back this year, and we'll talk about the conference in a little bit. But I have found the Mindful Leader organization to be, in my humble opinion, which I greatly respect, to be just one of, if not the premier mindfulness organizations out there. And I'm happy to be aligning myself with it, partnering with it, getting certifications through it. And I found you in particular, as the leader of that organization, to be just a remarkable individual. And that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because I'm just very impressed with you. And so I appreciate you coming on. But tell us a little bit about yourself and about Mindful Leader. Just tell us a little bit about you.
Wow. Thank you, David. I'm blushing. So for a second, that was really, really kind of what you said. We work very hard. We believe very deeply about our mission, and I've got a really great team, and just wonderful. We've created this really wonderful community. So, a lot of what we do has been touched on by so many people, and I feel just real deep appreciation for what you shared, because we worked really hard to get here. So maybe I'll start with sharing a little bit about my background and how Mindful Leader sort of came to be. I always think that's useful for folks to just have a sense. So I graduated Virginia Tech Computer Engineering, as you mentioned, during the .NET bubble. So it was a really exciting time to start a career in technology. And my career took off very quickly, working for a number of companies and consulting and doing all sorts of things. Eventually, I started my own company and didn't really have a background in leadership or management, just always wanted to try to start something on my own. We grew from 0 to 30 people in less than 3 years, became a multi-million-dollar company, specifically doing ecosystem recruiting, using technologies to do ecosystem recruiting. And our big client and the organization that really helped us take off was Microsoft. And in that time, I didn't really have a solid foundation for how to deal with the stress and things that come up being an entrepreneur, and didn't really have a real good model for leadership. I sort of adopted this alpha, aggressive, kind of ruthless mentality, and that was really reinforced with the folks that at that time I was associated with. I wanted to be a better leader. So to give you a quick example, I hired a business coach, and he told me my employees are like horses. One set will take me from point A to B, and I can put them down to get a fresh set to take me from point B to C. And it was very counter, I think, to just how I naturally was. And so it was very difficult for me. But I thought, all right, this is what I'm supposed to do. And on paper, we're doing pretty well. And I was sort of this whiz kid boy wonder, featured in magazines, speaking at conferences, kind of helping spearhead this new approach. And in 2009, things started going backwards. Everything fell apart, and there was a hiring freezes, and just all sorts of companies were pulling back. We were over leveraged, and the whole company fell apart. I got flipped upside down, and suddenly, I mean, we pretty much got wiped out. And it was a very difficult moment for me. I'd always been pretty successful financially and just in everything I would take on. And I was devastated, and just really trying to make sense of things. I just felt like I was dropped on my head. And in that, I would look at myself in the mirror, and I was a jerk. I was not a pleasant person. I use different language. I don't know what kind of language I could use here, but I was not a
You
good
can say
person.
whatever you want to say. Yeah.
I was an asshole, is what I would say. Better describes it, right? And I wouldn't hang out with myself. And I thought to myself, what have I become? Who is this guy? Why did I become this way? I didn't have the company to hide behind. I didn't have any excuse, and realized and asked myself, what's this all for? And I chased after this thing, and just like that, everything got taken away from me. And I had a chance to reminisce and reflect and realize how much um, the way that I was behaving affected others, the amount of suffering that I caused, whether it was my vendors, my employees, or myself, the things I was chasing after. And that really opened me up. I started searching, and was very fortunate to stumble across some really great books, and then stumbled across a great meditation class that was offered locally in DC, a really great meditation retreat that I did, an integral coaching program, and all this stuff just expanded my thinking. And I discovered that people were out there doing things and having impact, being successful in the ways that I always got excited about, but with a different approach, and with a mindful approach, with compassion. And when I discovered this, I felt, wow, I wish I'd known this earlier. And kind of wish the business coach I had known this, and all the folks I was associated. Like, why didn't anyone tell me this? And at that point, it really was clear to me that for me, there was an opportunity to help others who might go down the same path I did realize that there were other options out there. And that all was in 2009, 2010 or so. And so that's when I started to get really interested and involved in figuring out, making sense of what was out there.
I love that story, and it parallels a lot of stories I hear of people who get into mindfulness. I'm curious, because you've been into mindfulness, obviously, quite heavily for many years now. What kind of, based on your own experience and what you've seen of others, since you've experienced this transformation, I guess you could call it, what would you say to younger Mo? Like if you went back, let's say you're in the coaching session and it's early Mo and the business consultant sitting in the room, And the business consultant is telling you, hey, people are like horses, you can run them and put them down. And then Mo of today is sitting there. How might you interject and what would you say in the room?
Wow. That's a great question. But the first thing I want to share, so as far as transformation goes, I am still a work in progress. And so I'm not going
We
to
all
claim
are.
to have
Yes.
this.
Yes, we all are. Yeah.
And so but it did open me up to new possibilities in a new path. So I think that's how I would describe that. And I do think, because I feel like we do often bump into folks that could benefit from words of wisdom and advice and some guidance. And part of me does wonder if there is this element of timing, right? Like it might not have mattered if I was there because I just wasn't ready to hear it. And sometimes it takes folks that are as stubborn and hard-headed as me. Sometimes we need to be dropped on our heads so that there's a bit of a crack, and then there's a possibility for something new. And I know that might be a little bit graphic, but that's certainly how it felt. An opportunity. And so I say that all not to completely avoid your question, but just to make clear that sometimes there's only so much people are open to. And then what really I think occurs to me is, because in our work, we want more folks to be open to this. So how can you get folks to be more open to this? And with that, I wonder if the most effective thing might have been to be able to show an example, to not necessarily sort of lay down some advice or quote one of these amazing teachers out there, but to show an example. And at least in what I've learned, the best example is myself. And so if I was able to show that younger Mo that, hey, look, I'm doing a lot of the things that you're hoping to do, but I've got this new approach, and this new approach is working, and here is how it looks, and here's is sort of the practical steps, that might be effective. Because early on, I think a lot of folks, we hear about the importance of emotional intelligence, we hear about the importance of all these things, but you don't really get any clarity on how to develop that. No one really sits you down and says, here are the things that you can do. Like, here are like the practical ways that you could improve or strengthen those muscles in a sense. And especially at that time, it was even a little bit, for lack of a better word, it wasn't very macho to talk about these things. And so now I feel like we've come a long way. And then it was almost, you could be judged or looked at with certain sort of inferiority if you even acknowledge that this was something that you're working on. So that's what comes up for me, this idea of maybe showing that through example that, hey, like the things that you want are possible, but you don't have to take that way. Here's a different way, and here's how you could actually get there.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer and a wise answer. Don't you find, because what you're getting at, what I'm hearing, don't you find that in your experience, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but I see that a lot of people come to mindfulness through some form of suffering.
Yes, I've talked to quite a few people, and that a lot of folks have, and then every once in a while you will get folks who grew up around it, and you will get people who just like had almost I don't know, I consider it very lucky, like folks who just sort of gravitated towards it without having to go through all the pain.
Yeah, I agree. Well, tell us about Mindful Leader. So you ended up, how did Mindful Leader start, and tell us about what they do?
Absolutely. So the first thing, and this was probably, I had bills to pay, so I had to go back to work, and full time I was working doing IT program management with NASA and then later DHS. And I did stuff on the side, had sort of the side gig, the side hustle. And just with a real commitment for this work, I started creating little online communities and started a Facebook group, posting and sharing things. Did a bit of one-on-one coaching with individuals and a fair number of nonprofit organizations and executives, and did this all on the side. And it wasn't until about 20, and I got involved. I got super involved with just the different meditation communities and nonprofits, just to learn more and deepen my skills, but also just get connected to the community. And as I mentioned, I did a couple meditation retreats and got exposed to really fantastic teachers and all that, reading, taking it all in. So really just starting to understand. And at the same time, I went to conferences, went to events, met folks, and started to get plugged in, and saw there was an event at the time, and they did their first Wisdom 2.0. They're West Coast typical events. They did an event in New York with more of a business focus, and I thought, wow, this is fascinating. And it was a group of folks, and for me, sometimes with these things that we do in the mindfulness world, they do tend to draw what I would say people that tend to be higher income earners and more sort of an exclusive crowd. And I thought to myself, and I didn't grow up that way, and I didn't grow up in that my friends groups, the folks I grew up around were very much of mixed income and often lower income and socially economically disadvantaged. So for me, like, the idea was, all right, let's take a look at what's happening there, and can we create something that would still draw a fairly passionate audience, but be accessible to more folks. And at that time, I started thinking about doing an event, partnered with my partner for the first few summits, who had done events and who had a background in that and had done a lot of work around Buddhist spiritual type events. And so we partnered up and put on the first summit. And to our surprise, there was this incredible response to it, where we reached out to people that we didn't think would say yes. We tapped into all the connections that we had built over the years. And before you knew it, the first summit we did, we sold out, and we had to expand the capacity. And it was completely grassroots. To give you a sense of how wild it was, I mean, I remember making Costco runs and buying like fruit and coffee and things, and lugging the stuff into the venue that we found, being hands-on with everything. I mean, it was pretty much the two of us, and we had a little bit of support, but it was quite a lift. And just the warm response, the excitement, the caliber of individuals that were interested in our ability to do this in a way that we were able to kind of stay true to that idea that, we're not going to charge like $4,000 and make this like a C-suite thing. We're going to do this in a way that we could really open it up to anyone who has an interest. Was just really exciting. And then things just started to take off from there.
Well, and the summits have grown to be fantastic. And I'll talk more about the summits in just a moment. But so you've grown from there, and you offer trainings, certifications, retreats, around the clock, meditations, just all kinds of offerings.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the things that connect things together. So we are, from the very beginning, the essence of community is very important to me, and so you'll see that in everything we do. Whether it's the conference, we have a unconference portion of the conference that's completely community run. With our MBSR live and online classes, we become the largest provider of MBSR in the world. We launched that in February of 2020, and when the pandemic happened, it was something that I'm just the timing worked out that we were offering it. We believed in Zoom, we believed in technology, and so we had really figured out how best to do that. And we celebrated our 200th MBSR class with John Kabat-Zinn, doing a We Heart MBSR event on Valentine's Day of this year. And so that was really special. And even in MBSR, you have this really deep element of community and group learning. And Meditate Together is the offering that we have on the clock 24 hours a day, 5 days a week. We're starting to do some weekends too, this wonderful global community where people get an opportunity to host a silent meditation session and come together with other human beings and meditate. And so I do think that these apps and things out there are useful, but there's something really quite special about meditating with other people. And throughout everything that we do, there's not only this aspect of learning these practices and learning how to do these things on your own, but also connecting with other people and really feeling that support and that fulfillment of being part of a community and knowing how essential that is to the ongoing efforts that are required to sustain these practices and to sustain this work in a broader way. So that summarizes sort of a little bit of our approach. So we've got community. We want to enable individuals, and for us, our main focus areas are workplace mindfulness, and with our certified workplace mindfulness program, with the Mindful Leader Summit and all that we do, really helping organizations, individuals in organizations, and folks who might be serving organizations figure out how to do this work. And what I found when we were doing that was that the very foundation of mindfulness was getting a little bit blurry and confusing, where people didn't necessarily know what mindfulness is, what it isn't. All sorts of things out there were being called mindfulness. And there was a lot of shifts happening within the MBSR community in ways that it felt concerning that if there wasn't a real credible mindfulness program out there, that we didn't have a foundation to build off of. So from that, we decided to get involved with MBSR. With Meditate Together, it was a real response to COVID and sort of the isolation and the loneliness, and to kind of counteract this real heavy tech dependence. And so, often you'll see a lot of the things that we're doing are to help fill a void that's out there, and really to help create this foundation that I hope will help the generations and generations to come to carry this work forward.
Mo, you mentioned the workplace focus. So one of the reasons that I personally feel really drawn to Mindful Leader is, in my own work, I do workplace work. That's my focus. And I personally have trying to think of the right word, not just an affinity, but I have a commitment to a secularized approach to mindfulness. And Mindful Leader does as well. So maybe speak a little bit to why Mindful Leader takes that approach. And then we've been talking about MBSR. So anybody who's listening and they may not know what MBSR is, kind of explain that for them.
Great question. And I could talk about hours on end about this particular subject. It's something that's very, very near and dear to me, but I'll do the shortened version. I'll start by talking about MBSR. So there are a lot of different training programs out there that consider themselves mindfulness and meditation programs. MBSR was started by Professor John Kabat-Zinn at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center in 1979. And it has been provided, it's the number one program taught in academia and taught in medical institutions. So it has a great deal of credibility. And at the UMass Center of Mindfulness, they really developed a wonderful program that would then, therefore, teachers could learn, that has a certain sort of set of standards, but also would allow teachers to customize and insert a bit of their themselves within the course. Now, within MBSR, and it's also the most scientifically studied, the most researched. So often when you see a lot of the studies out there, it's based on MBSR. One of the things that I really love about MBSR is this group dynamic, where people are in a group together. They are very much experiencing the practices. And so it isn't so much you're being told, you should think this way, do this, or this is what's going to happen, but you experience it. And there's this real magical effect when people are experiencing the practice together, sharing what they're experiencing and learning from one another. So the facilitators really, the MBSR teachers really act as facilitators and guides, and they don't put themselves above their students or give any sort of impression of kind of guru or sort of superiority. And so these are some of the elements I think that make MBSR so effective, and that I found just so appealing to be part of. MBSR also, thanks to John Kabat-Zinn, doesn't have a proprietary effect where it isn't necessarily licensed out or controlled by one organization. It's set up in a way that multiple institutions are able to contribute and are able to adopt and teach and offer it out there. And this idea of sort of an open source, open framework for me is really appealing, coming from the tech world, seeing how effective that is, both in, I think, capturing the spirit of what we're doing, but then also there's a fair kind of strategic business sense that you could make of it too. When you open things up, you could really allow a wider community to contribute and to evolve with it. So MBSR has all these wonderful qualities. And MBSR has also been fairly good at being able to draw from the Buddhist roots of meditation practices in a way that the practices are offered without a spiritual affinity or coloring. So that way it provides it in a way that's inclusive. So in a medical setting, you'd hate to turn someone off that's trying to deal with their pain, which, pain and stress, which MBSR really help with, because they didn't have the same religious beliefs. And so you have to approach it in that way. So all these things were things that I really appreciate about MBSR. There are some things that I think, David, you've heard me talk in different settings. So I'm a pretty critical thinker, and there's always going to be things that I will kind of not. And so there are some things in MBSR that also I feel could be improved, but we'll save that for another conversation. And when it comes to Mindful Leader and our approach, some of the things that I should share, like for me, I grew up Muslim, Moshe from Muhammad, and so I, come from in different ways of seeing the positive and sometimes the other effects of religion. And when it came to meditation and mindfulness, I stumbled across it through a spiritual community, the Unitarian Universalists, which is a really wonderful spiritual community that I was part of, and it's where I got exposure to my first meditation teacher. With that all said, there is a real concern that I have for what I've seen happen over the last decade or so. In particular, what feels like the use of spirituality to make money off people. And so often our culture is very capitalistic. We have kind of the celebrity draw. We've got all this social media stuff happening out there. And so I have seen organizations, programs, and things that have been created in a way that taps into that really deep spiritual need that we have, that real deep spiritual part of our lives. And in some ways, I believe, abuses that by mixing it with capitalism in a way that feels opportunistic, in a way that feels that there's massive conflicts of interest, and ways that feel disingenuous and contradictory to the essence of the spiritual things that are being taught. And so just to give a quick example, in Buddhism, a Buddhist teacher, a Buddhist, a monk is not supposed to charge for their offerings. Your students are so vulnerable to you that then you are vulnerable back to them. And so if you're going to kind of reveal and open up, the deepest part of yourself to your teacher in that way, then the teacher therefore gives up all the kind of monetary and comforts in a way that whatever sustenance they get is through pure donation. And I find that is common across a lot of spiritual and religious traditions, to create this dynamic where there is this incredible vulnerability that's offered, and then it's exchanged back in that way. And so I feel a lot of things that I see out there are violating that in ways that I feel could in some ways diminish the potential of this work and harm the reputation of those of us that are approaching it in a different way. So with that all said, I think there's a beauty in spiritual dimensions of mindfulness and meditation. I respect folks who are doing that and and my Buddhist friends and even the different
Right.
communities I'm part of, but I feel like you don't mix. And for us in the workplace setting, we want this to be inclusive to all beliefs. We want this to respect the kind of spiritual dynamics and allow people to approach that elsewhere, and really to focus on the universal benefits of this practice, and really being able to, through these exercises, be connected to the moment in a non-judgmental way, and all the benefits that come from that with our relationship to ourselves, our relationship with other people, and our ability to have clarity in what we really want to do and who we really want to be.
Yeah, and that's what draws me to Mindful Leader, is that secular approach to it, and I think it's very beneficial in the workplace, which is where I do my work, and I think that's one of the reasons I connect so well to Mindful Leader, and I appreciate that about it. Let's talk just a second about the summit. I always call it the conference because that's kind of a conference thing, but it is the mindful. Is it the Mindful Leader Summit, the Mindfulness Summit? I can never remember the exact name. It's the
Mindful Leader Summit. Yes.
The Mindful Leader Summit. I want to say this. So in my career, I come from an HR background, and I worked in HR for almost 20 years. And I've been to, I can't even count the number of conferences I've been to. I've also been a part of putting on many conferences. When I went to the Mindful Leader Summit last year, I didn't know what to expect. I was excited to go because of my own career and work in mindfulness now. But first, I was blown away with just the quality of the event, just top-notch event in Washington, D.C. The other thing, there are several things that I was just very impressed with. All of the speakers that you invited were just top shelf, incredible speakers. But the other thing was the participants that I was very impressed with. You go to a lot of conferences, and the thing that I kept being aware of was how you go to conferences and people are always trying to impress you with their own credentials, their own accomplishments. There was none of that at this conference, and it was refreshing. It was very refreshing that people weren't trying to impress you. And the room was filled with people who were PhDs and just all kinds of, very accomplished people, people at very high business levels. Nobody's sitting around trying to impress you. They're just talking and getting to know each other. And that was very refreshing. Nobody's trying to one up each other. Also, another thing that happens at events is, I've just told a lot of people this, so I'm telling you because I haven't had a chance to tell you this, but you're talking to people, and when they're a speaker at the event, when you're talking to them at other conferences, they're always like, "Oh, and I'm speaking, be sure and come to my event." Well, you're talking to people for 3 days at this event, and they just never mentioned that they were speaking. And then you turn around and they're speaking on the main stage. You're like, I've been talking to that person for 2 days. They never even mentioned that they were speaking. I think the humility at this event is innate. It's not put on. It's just who these people are. And that was just incredibly refreshing. And then just the level of intelligence and depth of everyone. I couldn't wait to come back this year. So I'm super excited. Tell us a little bit, whatever else you want to say about the Mindful Summit. This episode, I didn't tell you when it's going to air. Let me look real fast. Mo, it's going to air September 11th. So it'll be before the conference goes on. Tell us when the conference is, and just tell us whatever else you want to say about the summit.
I don't know if I could add any more to what you said. I really appreciate hearing the feedback directly. And for us, we work really hard. Like, the events take so much effort. So it's always so wonderful to hear from folks. And what we do hear from folks here and there, and through different mechanisms, feedback surveys, and just chatting to folks, what they think of the summit. But I appreciate everything that you just shared. And just some just high level things. The summit is September 28th through October 1st. So it's 4 days. It will be in the Washington, D.C. metro area. We've got this really wonderful venue, the DoubleTree down there. The first day of the summit is an unconference where essentially the attendees lead the whole thing, and we have a lot of fun. It's highly engaging. The Friday and Saturday have more of a typical conference format where we have keynotes and talks. We've got a really wonderful group of keynote speakers this year, including Professor Judson Brewer, the neuroscientist out of Brown, Professor Kristen Neff, who did a lot of work around mindfulness, self-compassion. And we've got Mark Brackett, who is the director of emotional intelligence from Yale. And so we've got a really wonderful lineup of keynotes. Then we've got a ton of wonderful talks we're experimenting with a little bit more of a track layout. So we'll have specific case studies, we'll have insight talks, we have a ton of researchers and folks as well, sharing some of the work that they're doing. And then on that Sunday, we'll have half-day workshops. And so exploring certain themes and really getting a bit more hands-on around skills that people could use to take back. With the summit, we try to curate not only a really wonderful lineup of topics and speakers, but to create an atmosphere. And I think what I'm just so happy to hear is that the atmosphere that you described is what we're trying to do. And there's subtle things that we do. And given that we've done this over the years, we have a really wonderful group of folks who come back to the summit too. And so it kind of deepens and carries forward, where it just has this really wonderful vibe and culture, right? It sort of has its own culture. And when you step into that, I think it gives us all a sense of what things could be like in whatever cultures we're coming from. So someone might come from a company or a setup where it doesn't have that same feel, and then they experience it and they get a feel for what's possible. And so even the environment of the conference itself, in some ways, is an opportunity to learn and experience and take back. So those are things that would highlight. Like we do have practice sessions at the summit. We do have some meditation yoga. We'll have some really wonderful case studies where we get a chance to hear from folks about how they've done this work in the workplace. It's not easy. I like to tell people there's a lot of passion around it, but we've all been in work environments and there's always those challenges. And so really hearing about how others have in different settings, in different industries, with different company sizes, have had the ability to get programs going, I think is really valuable. And then we do have a lot of talks around the research, the neuroscience, and then the practical skills to do this. So that's what I would share. And of course, on our website, you could find out more if folks are curious.
That's great. And that website is mindfulleader.org. I would tell anyone, if they have any interest in mindfulness in the workplace, this summit cannot be missed. You absolutely must be at this is the summit to be at for this. All right. I've got some other questions for you, but let's take a little pause right now, Mo. We like to do something we call the Music Minute. We feel like we can get to know people better when we learn what kind of music they like. And I love music, so I just like learning about the music people enjoy. Mo, tell us what kind of music you like, maybe some of the artists, songs, concerts. Just tell us about the music that you enjoy.
Oh, you're touching an area that I care very deeply about. So I did play in a band for a little while, and so I used to jam, and I've created a little bit of music here and there. But I'll give you sort of my quick kind of musical route.
What instrument did you play?
I played guitar and I sang, but honestly, we were pretty awful, but we had fun doing it. So it was, we just had a ton of fun doing it. So. But I started off, I was a huge Beatles fan growing up, and it was at a time when it wasn't cool to like the Beatles. All of a sudden it kind of came back.
Has it ever not been cool to like the Beatles? When was this?
The 80s? Like, I remember getting into argument. Well, I think it might depend. It depends on the generation. So I remember getting into an argument with a kid, this is either junior high or high school, about what band was better, like Guns N' Roses or the Beatles. And so, there's those kind of things. And I listened to oldies when I was in high school, like the oldies radio station. I've got just a deep love for Motown and some of the older stuff. And for me, like I just have a lot of fun finding stuff that others like more independent music and things. So, and then I'll also mention just a shout out to Radiohead. I got big into Radiohead. So the Beatles and Radiohead were like two of the bands that really were formative in just affecting the way that I approached music and dabbled in music, and then some of the music I listened to. But most recently, like the band that I love these guys. There's a band called Feed Me Jack. And the beauty of this band, by the time I discovered them, they already broke up. And this is just the beauty of the internet, because these are like young college kids, and you get sort of a real interesting peek into like the band as it's forming. And I was so excited about them and thought they'd go on to do incredible things. And fortunately, two of the guys from the band went off, and one guy started a group, an indie project called Still Woozy, and he blew up. And I was like on Spotify, like 300 million listens and that kind of thing. And so I also get this real great joy when you know you discover something and it's sort of before people are talking about it, and then all of a sudden they get exposure and everyone loves them, and you're like, yes, that's wonderful. And then the other I would guess kind of lead singer in that band and influencer was this guy Bobby, and he started a thing called bobbing, and it's very experimental. It also has done well, but for me, it kind of has this real raw, and sometimes that music is just so inspiring to me because it's just not, you don't necessarily hear this stuff out there more widely. So that's my band, like Feed Me Jack. Like they're the band that like if I could get them to reform, I drop everything I'm doing. I'm just like I'm your manager. You guys should have been like huge and could have been, but they followed their own path and they're all doing well.
All right. So I'm curious about Hungry for Music. When I saw that in the nonprofits that you work with, tell us about Hungry for Music.
Yeah, so that's a great nonprofit run by my buddy Jeff Campbell, and I haven't been as closely affiliated with him lately, but did do quite a lot of work with him in the past. And I met Jeff actually at a 10-day meditation retreat, and he has just a beautiful soul, beautiful just throughout. Sometimes you meet someone and you just like could see that they're the real deal. And he had this idea, and I want to say maybe 25 years ago that he's been at it for a long time, where he would basically take musical instrument donations, fix them up, and then turn around and provide these instruments to folks who otherwise couldn't afford them. And I just thought it was such a beautiful thing. And so he's got different drop-off points. He'll do nationwide tours. He'll do all sorts of things to collect instruments, any rehabilitation or whatever they need to be fixed up, cleaned up, and to be used, and then turn around and offer them out to kids who want them. And I felt so touched by that because I feel a lot of kids, it's very difficult to afford a musical instrument, and it feels sort of out of range. And so and I think music has just such a powerful effect and potential on people. So just wonderful organization. It's hungryformusic.org. I'm pretty sure, and encourage folks to check them out and get involved and donate if you like. And if you got some instruments that you're looking to put, to offer and put out there for good use, please consider them.
That's wonderful. I love it. All right. I wanted to ask you about this because, excuse me, this is one of my favorite things about you. There's so much to like about you, Mo, but this was when like you everything I learned about you, you just kept growing in my esteem for you. And then at the summit last year, you knocked a grand slam for me. And it was the afternoon when you gave your talk about, I don't know what to call it, but I call it maybe criticisms of mindfulness. So you spoke about how, I guess in the past, maybe a couple of years ago or something like that, you had some people who had spoken out against mindfulness or some aspects about mindfulness, and you had invited them to come speak at the summit, and you took some heat over that. But knowing that you did that just made me fall in love with you, because I'm the kind of person who I'm just like, we need to be able to, one, use our critical thinking, and why wouldn't we want to talk to our critics and at least hear what they have to say? And the fact that you did that, that just made me know the kind of person you are. And I love that. And you talked a lot about it. And then when we had our certified workplace mindfulness facilitator training, you talked about the same thing to that group as well. Talk to us a little bit about that. Maybe what are some of the criticisms of mindfulness, and then what your thoughts are about maybe some of those criticisms, and why you think it's important to invite that in.
Thanks, David. And this is an area that for me is very dear, and it was honestly, it was a little bit frightening too, because I feel like our culture has gone through all these different ways of how we're responding to things. But to give a little context, in 2019, I want to say, it was maybe 2019, we shared an article about how a Christian right-wing nonprofit was suing my friend's organization that was introducing mindfulness to schools. And that caused such an uproar. And we just shared this, and people just freaked out and got nasty. And this is like a community of people that are connecting around mindfulness, and called us idiots. And, how could you put this out there? How dare you? What's wrong with you guys? And so it got really nasty. And for me, there's a part of me, I think it just has to do with circumstance and how I grew up in my background, that often when you get that, it's like, wait a minute, like there's another side to this. Let's not just automatically shut them down. And whenever people want to shut down a voice or a side, again, it's probably because of my background and where I grew up, that I think we need to give people a chance to share, to better understand them, because there's so much misunderstanding in this world. So when I saw that, I was curious. I was a little scared too. Like, it's like, whoa. But we approached and reached out, and I discovered that one of the main folks that was part of this lawsuit was this woman by the name of Candy Brown, Professor Candy Brown. I found out at the University of Indiana, with a PhD in divinity studies from Harvard. So here was someone that had credibility. And so I decided to reach out to her and did an online interview with her, invited her to the summit. And what I found was that there was a lot to learn from her. And even though we didn't agree on many things, she wasn't this kind of scary demon that I think people were making her out to be. And the organization that she was part of, there's a lot of things that, again, we might not agree with, but there were human beings just like the rest of us that were trying to do what they thought was best for children, right? And so for me, it was like, hey, like let's hear each other out. And in that hearing each other out, what I found, which was a bit surprising to me, was that suddenly my knowledge and understanding had leveled up in a way that wasn't happening necessarily in some of the echo chambery conversations that we're having within our community. And so when you're talking to people who agree with you, that sort of has the same background as you, same understanding as you, often there's this reinforcement, but you don't necessarily uncover the flaws in thinking or new ways of thinking or the possibilities. So there was this incredible experience that I had, and then with no support or encouragement from anyone, I decided to invite her to the summit, decided to make it a keynote, decided to do a debate, which people in the mindfulness community are like, debate? Like, are we even supposed to debate? And I'm like, guys, like, it's okay to debate. You could be mindful and debate. And after that, people were they felt the same thing I felt, which was like, whoa, like this is actually fun. And this is invigorating. And this is, there's a benefit in this. And so, to share some of the key things that I think outside of this opportunity to kind of bake in critical thinking and debate, I did an article recently on dialectic thinking, which I think is very important. But some of the things that she helped uncover were specifically around this idea of being religiously inclusive. And so when you hear from someone who's coming from a Christian right nonprofit, and you hear some of their concerns, it starts to make us wonder, like, hey, like we actually want them to be part of this. Like we could use mindfulness to bring people together, and people who have different beliefs and different political affiliations, different religious affiliations, like no one should be excluded. And I think that was one of the key things, just given how much time we have, that I would highlight, that if we're willing to listen, if we're willing to invite discord and back and forth, and not sort of silence or block or ignore people just because they don't agree with us, there's a great opportunity to learn, and there's a great opportunity to welcome them to our community and to this work, and expand this work to reach those very people that I believe we'd love to see part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great message, and you're a great example of that. Well, I've only got time for maybe one more question. I want to ask you, what do you see as far as the future of mindfulness, maybe mindful leadership, maybe what you're concerned about, or maybe optimistic about, or maybe both? What do you see for the future?
Wow. So I do believe that we are coming out of what has been a real rough time, with just kind of the political polarization, with COVID. And my background is technology. And so I am really excited about AI. And we've done a couple of different articles about AI, and some of the things to pay attention to. I'm also excited in a lot of what I would say are, politics sometimes for me is really, really disturbing, but I've just seen some really bizarre things. And I'll just give you in American politics of people coming together. I'm like, wait a minute, what? There's the guy Russell Brand, who's very left,
Uh-huh.
and he had Tucker Carlson on his podcast, and they were talking together like buddies. I was like, whoa, this is interesting. I saw Bill Maher, who runs Politically Incorrect, typically very left and liberal, in a conversation with Jordan Peterson, who's very much associated to conservative right. And again, like they're finding commonalities. And so I feel like there has been a real exciting willingness to have conversations. And I feel like right now, we're building up to an election, and there's some interesting, long shot candidates from both sides that are saying things that I'm like, it's about time, and really encouraging dialogue and connection and depth, and exploring meaning and purpose and identity, all these things that are very dear. So I'm really excited about just the shift that feels like maybe we're finally starting to realize that, hey, we don't want to go down that path. Like that's awful. And we really are united around some core essential human things that I feel like we all cherish, and we're remembering that, and hopefully figuring out how to work with that versus all the things that we don't agree on. And then, just the AI component of it. Like I could talk about hours about AI, but I think there's really exciting things that people haven't even really started to grasp. And I'll give you just one quick aside, given our time. So I recently stumbled across a CNN story about how they've used AI to translate MRI brain scans. And so they were able to show an individual a scene, and then take their brainwaves, and they took these brainwaves and pumped it into ChatGPT-1. So this is like an early version of ChatGPT, and it was able to translate their brainwaves, these signals, and sometimes we'll see like these colorful images that are put out there, into language. And so it was able to take the scan, translate it to what the person was thinking. So in our lifetimes, I'm really quite convinced that we're going to be able to actually tune into our inner dialogue. We'll have sort of cheap brain scanning things that will be able to print out what we're thinking, and whether it's when we're sleeping or during the day. And then these things might be tied to kind of on the spot interventions, that all of a sudden your little AI coach might pop out and say, hey, David, I see you're ruminating about this or that. Maybe it's time to take a break. Like that seems very possible in our lifetimes. And I just, the the potential of it's just incredible. And then of course there's the downside of it, which is all of a sudden you might have organizations like Facebook reading your brainwave scans and
Right.
signals and knowing exactly what you're thinking and being able to give you, to tap into that to take advantage of you. So there is another side to it too.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that what's going to happen with technology is, I think it's going to be fantastic. It's like everything, there's pros and cons to all of it, but you know, air conditioning is great, and we didn't have air conditioning a long time ago, and laptops are great. We didn't have laptops a long time ago. So I think things are generally for the better, and it's all how we use the tools we get. So yeah, I'm excited for the future as well. Well, Mo, I deeply appreciate your time, and this has been a great discussion. And I think you're a wonderful individual. I think Mindful Leader is a great organization, and everyone can go check out mindfulleader.org. How do they get in touch with you if they're interested in contacting you?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn, and also my email is mo@mindfulleader.org. Sometimes it does take me a minute to respond to emails, and so I don't. We do have processes for speaker applications and all sorts of things. So please, I encourage folks to follow the right processes for the right things. But happy to be of help otherwise.
Great, thank you. All right, thanks, Mo.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
What a great discussion with Mo Edjlali. I'm sure you learned a lot from it and really enjoyed that discussion as much as I did. We're going to have a meditation in just a moment. Before we do, I'd love to ask you if you would do us a favor and go out and rate and review the Mindful Leader podcast. This helps people know that people are enjoying the podcast, and you can leave a comment as well as rating it. Tell people what you thought about this episode or any other episode you listen to. So thank you for doing that. Also, would invite you to go to pendulumcoaching.com. That is our website, and you can do several things there. One of the things is we have a weekly email newsletter you can sign up for. So you can get that. I send out just a short email each week about leadership, mindfulness, emotional intelligence, those topics. They're not very long, so it's something you wouldn't mind getting in your inbox. So be sure to sign up for that. You can also invite me to come speak for your event or organization. I have a lot of topics we can talk about, mostly emotional intelligence, mindfulness, and leadership, those topics. So let's take a moment and get ready for a moment of meditation. Normally what I do in these is I pick something out of the conversation that struck home with me particular, and we kind of dial in on that for our meditation time. Today with Mo, I thought that it would be good just to do kind of a basic mindfulness meditation. Maybe it's something you're not familiar with, you haven't experienced a lot of, and you're tuning in to learn more about it. But I thought we'd just do a very simple, short mindfulness meditation today. So always, if you're driving, please be careful, be safe when you're driving. Otherwise, if you're just sitting in a chair like this, you can just place your feet on the floor, maybe place your hands in your lap, kind of lean back against the chair, get comfortable. If you're laying down somewhere, that's totally fine. Let's just close our eyes, if you would, if you feel comfortable doing that. And I always like to take a few breaths just to kind of settle down from the interview and transition into this time. If you would just inhale and exhale and inhale and exhale. And one last time, inhale and exhale. And you can continue to just breathe normally. For this basic mindfulness meditation, we talk about mindfulness being present and aware. That's the focus of mindfulness, being present and aware without judgment. So as we begin this meditation, I would like for you to just be present, if you would. Just be aware. If you need something to focus on, you can always focus on your breath. And you might just listen to the sounds around you. Be aware of and notice the sounds around you as we begin. Don't let sounds that might typically bother you or annoy you, don't let them upset your focus. Just notice and be aware of without judging the sounds. Let's just take a few moments for that. It's interesting sometimes when we get quiet and really pay attention, we notice those sounds around us that maybe we don't typically pay attention to. You might have heard the air conditioning where you are, or maybe people in rooms around you. I noticed the whir of my computer fan. Also heard a car driving down the street and a dog barking in the distance. But it's just a good practice to just notice what is happening around you. It's also good to notice what's happening within us. Let's take the next few moments, if you would. Just notice your body, how it feels, maybe the weight of you sitting on your chair. You might notice aches and pains. You might notice just various feelings. You just take a few moments and be aware and notice what's happening in your body right now. There are so many different experiences we can notice as we focus in on our bodies. But we're just noticing. We're not judging. We're just being aware. Now, if you would, I want us to be aware of and notice our thoughts. We're not necessarily trying to empty our minds of thoughts when we meditate, but we're noticing what's there. This is a good time to really focus on your breath. Try to pay attention to your breath and be aware of what thoughts may float in and out of your mind as you try to focus on your breath. Just take a few moments and notice. Many times when we are meditating, we have thoughts going in and out of our mind. The act of meditation is the discipline and practice of returning your mind from those busy thoughts back to the area of focus, which in our case right now is our breathing. Take another moment and just practice that discipline of letting the thoughts go and returning your attention back to your breathing when you notice that you are paying attention to your thoughts. And finally, I would ask you to give yourself compassion as we finish this meditation. Sometimes we can be frustrated that we feel like we didn't do it right, or maybe bothered by the thoughts in our minds. Just take a moment right now and give yourself compassion. Tell yourself that you did a good job just attempting the meditation. You were successful. You did well. And you even love yourself during this time. Just take a few moments and give yourself compassion. Now let's breathe together. Let's inhale and exhale and inhale and exhale and inhale and exhale. If you like, you can begin to open your eyes. And I hope that was helpful for you and enjoyable, maybe even educational. I want to thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the Mindful Leader podcast. I deeply appreciate Mo Edjlali. Be sure to go check out mindfulleader.org, and you can also connect with Mo on LinkedIn. Be sure to tell your friends about us, and we appreciate it. And we will see you next time on The Mindful Leader.